My name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks for joining me for this IPA talk. And today I'm fortunate to have with me a couple of representatives from the Illinois State Board of Education to talk about the state's literacy plan that is now in process of being developed, and thought it was important for us to have both of you come in and share us a little bit about the plan itself and the process for the development of the plan and what people can expect from that, and know how they can still have an opportunity to get engaged. So Erica Tiemann as well as Kirsten Parr is with us. And so I'm going to let both of you just quickly introduce yourselves and your titles. As we were talking before we got started here, you know, titles at the state board seem to evolve and change. And so anytime I have a member of the ISB team on, I'm just like, you guys tell us who you are and what you do, and then we'll take it from there. So
yeah, thank you, Jason. So I'm Erica Tiemann. I'm the Director for Standards and Instruction. I've had that title for 3 years.
Okay.
I started out in career and tech education over ag education for the state. But yeah, so my team is leading the literacy plan work.
Awesome.
Because we do anything that aligns with the learning standards and supports educators and administrators in that way.
Excellent. Excellent. Kirsten.
So my role is project lead for standards and instruction. I started in that role earlier this spring. Prior to that, I've been with ISB since 2020.
Great. Well, thank you again for being here with us. So I'm just going to kind of pitch this out as a let's get it started kind of question. So, you know, the process has been underway now for a bit through the development of the state's literacy plan. We know nationally this has been a pretty big issue in education circles, as we've talked about. You know, reading, the science of reading is a concept that people maybe has heard a little bit about. And I know there's been some policy movement related to reading, but I'm grateful for, you know, both of you and leadership there in the agency to really try to get a hold of this issue so that we look at our reading instruction and what we're doing with reading for young people, so that we come at this kind of in a real pragmatic way. So I think to get us started, can you just share the impetus for the literacy plan, you know, when we got started and what really got us going?
Yeah, so the work really began actually a couple of years ago. We and my team was working on developing some PD for teachers, classroom teachers specifically around literacy. And around that time, the Right to Read Act and Science of Reading legislation was kind of sweeping across the nation. So I think this is maybe the third General Assembly that has entertained literacy legislation. So we had started that work, and then the bill that was just passed this year started taking form. So we paused that work because we wanted to make sure what we were doing was not going to be in conflict with the language of the legislation. So then, to start guiding us toward the literacy plan, we did a summit last fall over in Bloomington. We had over 100 experts from around the state, teachers, higher education faculty, administrators, and advocacy groups represented, to really kind of identify what are the issues and what are some strategies that people think we should be using. So from that work last fall, this spring, the legislation was being drafted, so we were a part of negotiating the language and just making sure, and that's kind of one of the things we do at ISB, is meet with legislators to make sure what they want to see happen is in alignment with what we can do and what would be evidence-based and best practices
we
in
like
education.
When there's alignment. Right?
Yes,
For sure.
yeah,
for sure.
Because anytime you can end up with conflict. With existing statute if people are not aware what's on the book. So,
and there are some very passionate advocates out there around this issue, rightfully so.
Yeah, literacy, reading, writing, speaking are essential skills to all the other content areas. Yep. You know, if students can't write, they're going to have problems in math, they're going to have problems in science, and so it's really foundational to everything else we do.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. So I'm a former chemistry and physics teacher, and I always, when we were still giving the ACT as our statewide test in Illinois, I always looked at, you know, when I look at my kids' scores, where science reasoning was concerned, there always appeared to be a pretty direct correlation between science reasoning and their reading comprehension score as well. That if one was up, the other was up, the other was down, the other, one was down, the other was down.
Well, and they can't develop content area literacy if they don't have the building blocks for more general literacy. So yeah, they have to have pretty solid skills to be able to do well at science reasoning questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So where are we at right now in the process with regards, we got legislation passed, we're now in the heavy development of the plan. Like what's currently happening here?
So as Erica mentioned, we had the Literacy Summit last fall, and at that time we had collected a lot of interest and information from stakeholders who wanted to be engaged. And as we became aware of the legislation that was moving through, we gathered a group of those stakeholders together as a very small drafting team to help us get something on paper. How can we form a literacy plan that's going to be cohesive and supportive of districts, teachers, all stakeholders engaged in this work? So 20 individuals joined us this spring for a rather furious drafting session. And over the period of around a few months, we put together what we've been referring to as a very drafty draft. And this allowed us to, have something out there for people to respond to. So once we knew the legislation was moving through and that the end goal would be for us to have a plan, we continued on that work so that we could thoughtfully engage with everyone around what needed to be included to make sure that it does the work that it's intended to do.
Sure. So go ahead.
The bill was just signed 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it was important to us that we go ahead, even though we maybe didn't have the finalized language of what the statute would say about the plan, we felt it was important to go ahead and start that work.
Yeah.
Because if we had waited until now, we'd be on a very tight timeline.
Yeah, because the deadline's January 31st, right?
Yeah.
It'd be difficult to have a quality
for it to be
product.
adopted by the board.
Yeah.
And with our process, it needs to be done in November to be prepared for that. So we did not want to be in a position where it was just a bunch of people at ISB writing a thing and putting it out there. So we started as soon as we could.
Well, and I believe, though, from a policy perspective, it was helpful that you and those stakeholders were busy on this work, even in the spring, because as we were advocating, with regards to other reading focused legislation that was being pursued out there, we said, can we hold on this until we have the literacy plan in place and let that be the driver so that we have a cohesive, systemic approach to this rather than just kind of a hodgepodge approach. So I think that's been helpful for all of us, for sure.
I agree.
Yeah. So what are we looking at in terms of key elements of the plan?
So the plan currently has 5 sections. The first starting with vision and purpose, then moving into effective instruction, really supporting what effective literacy instruction looks like in the classroom. The third piece is surrounding support for educators, both pre-service and in-service teachers. The fourth is regarding implementation and the supports needed by various groups of stakeholders and what their role in literacy supports and adoption would look like for having the plan in place. And then the fifth section is tools and resources. So we had engagement in various sections. The plan kind of morphed as the drafting team was working, and those are the 5 sections we ended up with. We've currently been engaged in feedback with the field, and there has been strong support for those different components of the plan. So we feel that those were strong indicators that, what we have identified as the supports and the structure of the plan fits what will be supportive to districts.
Yeah. So can you get into some specific types of feedback that you're hearing about the plan right now in its current form?
We've heard it's too long.
Well, that's not an uncommon thing.
But we've
for any
also
plan.
heard they want stuff added. So
Yeah.
we're really going to be trying to strike a balance in regard to making sure it is usable.
Yeah.
And it's something that can be consumed easily by the audiences that are intended for the different sections.
We've had a lot of requests surrounding if it's identified in the plan, where there's a tool or a resource that's connected, to having a solid line that would follow through the whole process. Kind of making it like a Google map for somebody who's reading it. I'm unsure, how much of that we'll be able to do, but that's our goal, is to make it as usable as possible. And there's been so many points of feedback, and the engagement surrounding the plan has been so high. We can't thank the field enough for rallying around to make sure that what is included in the plan matches what will be supportive.
There's been a lot of discussion around curriculum and endorsement of curriculum. And so that's been a good opportunity to both educate and have discussions on the concept of local control.
Right.
Our team at ISB really defends that local control pretty firmly. And so we think it's important to provide guidance on what makes for good curriculum and look for that solid curriculum, but also what you should be watching out for that is an indicator of not high quality curriculum.
Yeah, and what's interesting, both of you and a couple other members of the team were kind enough to come and meet with the IPA board and present the plan and hear some feedback from them. And I thought we had a really great dialogue. To that point, though, on the curricular aspect, I know they were very appreciative of having the ability, to retain local control. However, they still, though, are very interested in hearing what makes sense, what's good and research-based, because they're trying to protect themselves a bit from vendors that are just stamping, hey, this meets certain criteria, whether it really maybe does or not, or only parts of it does. And so having a little bit of guidance, where to be pointed to is really helpful.
And I think some of that will probably, based on the feedback we're receiving, some of that will come through in the professional development and learning that we will be developing after the plan is adopted. Because I think it's clear there's kind of a couple different streams that are needed, one for administrators and how do administrators support teachers in good literacy instruction, and build systems that are going to be supportive for the learners and the teachers, but also PD for the classroom teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to circle back to that in just a moment, but before getting there, where are we at in the plan's development? What's going to be happening between now and January 31?
So we've got public comment period open right now. There's a web page for the literacy plan, and there's a feedback form. So that's open. We've said through September 1, get your feedback in by September 1 if you'd like it to be included in the next draft, because after that date, we are going to start revising. So we'll get a revised plan. I think we're planning to take it back out in October.
Our rough goal is October, November to have another round of feedback listening sessions. So backing up a little bit, the plan was presented to the ISB board in June. And after that, we engaged in around the state listening tours. And we had the opportunity to go on site and have people come in and visit and listen to their feedback around the state. And then we also did so virtually. And then we've also been meeting with smaller stakeholder focus groups, like you mentioned, us coming to IPA. And that really allowed us to engage with the field and hear from every perspective that people brought. And so the hard work begins after we sit down with this feedback and kind of correlate and figure out where the plan needs more support, more information, what pieces are important to build out a little bit further. And so our goal is to take it back out to the field in October and November. In December, we'll take it as an informational item to the board, kind of give them an update. And then in January of 24, our hope is to have a finalized plan for them to adopt, to be in line with that legislative deadline of January 31st, 2024.
Yeah. So, looking forward here, and Erica, you got into this a little bit when you referenced professional learning and quite a bit that's going to need to be done to support school districts and educators in moving this forward. I'm just kind of curious from both of your perspective here. You talk about wanting to protect the local control aspect of it and the agency's position on that. But with that being said, what are you hopeful for districts to do with this plan once it's finalized and done? And how and if those the school leaders that I'm talking to, they're interested in knowing what this is going to be and then how it can help drive improvements around reading instruction and literacy in their schools. But what are your hopes for them on what to do with this and how is it going to help them move forward?
So and I'll speak on my part and then let Kirsten offer hers. But for me, a couple of my big hopes would be, number one, it drives them to really dig into outcomes through assessments and whether that's state or local assessments, to look at how their students are doing and really disaggregate that and figure out where our support's really needed. And are there indicators that there's some curriculum work needed or teachers need some professional learning, and then really intentionally and thoughtfully engage with their teachers to do vertical alignment, give teachers time specifically for this work, not just throwing it in with all the other mandated trainings and everything that they have to do, but really
we've been working on that ourselves, by the way, trying to streamline some of that stuff. So
I know there's a lot on everyone's plate, but I think this is a worthy cause to really get everybody in. It's something that everyone in your district needs to care about, because if students don't have adequate literacy skills, the impact on the rest of their life is really significant, from how they're able to do in high school to whether or not they're able to pursue the post-secondary careers they want. So for me, I really hope that this serves as a driver to really get some concerted efforts from local school boards to administrators to teachers and the community as well, to get behind this and support the teachers and learners.
And that support's going to be needed. And I think this kind of came up during our conversation when you joined the IPA board, was where reading instruction is concerned. I mean, it seems to be in this space more so, maybe because it is so critical and so important. People that do this work are so passionate about it. I mean, there is a tight emotional attachment to this. It seems more so than just about any other curricular area there. And
I mean, it's so essential. Like
that's right.
And the other thing about it that makes it kind of challenging is it's not a natural process. Like, it's not walking and talking where humans are going to learn to do those, like, kind of regardless of instruction. And so it's something that really has to be intentionally taught and learned. So like the number of things, when you really sit down and think about how many life trajectory pieces literacy impacts, it's really big.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'll just share from my own personal experience. One of my kids is severely dyslexic. And so my wife and I, it's been quite a learning journey, even for me in education for as long as I have, just to really get an idea of what's necessary for him to have what he needs now too. And so we need people to be willing to entertain what needs to be done here.
Yeah, and there's, I was a very advanced literacy skills, and in first grade I was referred for remedial reading. And my mom, who was a chemistry and physics teacher, she was like, no, you started kindergarten knowing how to read. But my teacher did not know how to handle an advanced reader. And so standardized test scores actually showed I was at a 6th grade reading level in first grade. And so what happened was they were doing the basal readers and they'd get around to me. And I'd been daydreaming because I was bored to tears. And it was like painful for me as a kid, listening to the other kids struggling and stumbling. And our teachers really need help and support to make sure we're able to meet every learner where they're at and keep increasing their skills.
So what, at this point, if people are interested in, of course, reading a plan if they haven't yet, which is, I'm sure, the case. We're coming off summer here to a degree, but individuals that are also not interested in just reading the plan, but still would like to maybe engage in the process overall. I mean, there are still opportunities to do that. So what do individuals need to do?
So we do have the feedback form available on the website, and our public listening sessions have concluded at this time. We're wrapping up the focus groups with those stakeholders, but in the future, we'll also be doing another listening tour with that second round feedback and on the second draft, so they can certainly engage at that time. But we really appreciate all the feedback we've received so far and look forward to integrating that into the document. And to piggyback off of Erica's last comments, I really hope that it engages everyone in districts, not only the classroom teacher, but administrators, to kind of look at it through the lens of, here's what we've been doing. Is this serving kids? And where do we need to maybe make some practice changes to further increase opportunities for students surrounding literacy? Because it's an opportunity to kind of, when you know better, you do better.
Right.
And so what practices do we need to abandon in order to engage in new initiatives and kind of best practices?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of good research done recently on a variety of things, I think, that you're taking into account that will be able to inform us moving forward.
You add the technology piece to it, and that's, a whole nother,
Yes, for sure.
That, some of our more seasoned teachers, like that was not a thing when they went through their teacher preparation program. So, and artificial intelligence, we've got a lot of educators are really struggling with how do we negotiate that in the learning space.
I think it can be done.
It can,
if we figure it out to handle it appropriately, right? And it can't be the be all end all.
I think at the end of the day, like the learners we have in classrooms right now, it is going to be a part of their future work world, personal world. So I think it's essential that we use it and teach them how to use it and leverage it. Being afraid of it is kind of...
I absolutely agree with that. We could have a whole nother IPA talk on that. In fact, we probably will in years to come. But I just as a quick note on that, though, I had an opportunity to sit in a demonstration with Sal Conmigo, and looking at how they've embedded AI into their tools. And I would offer that probably where, reading is concerned, there's some things that it will be able to do to help kids, to differentiate instruction. And
I don't know if you've seen, I was just listening to a podcast recently, and it was about using AI for teacher professional learning. So like when a teacher has a problem of practice, there's AI that they can use to say, here's my problem, and it'll give them
generate some ideas and everything
so
else.
It's like, I'm excited to think about how we can leverage that in that space too.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I would just offer, I'd probably like to have both of you back as the plan is coming towards completion, and maybe once we get into January, would definitely like to have a more concrete conversation about what the plan entails, and then how school districts can best leverage that moving forward to inform their practice and hopefully working to get better when it comes to reading instruction in their schools. So Erica Tiemann and Kirsten Parr, thanks for being here. Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks so much. My name's Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks for joining us for this IPA talk. As always, if there's anything the IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call or check us out on the web at ilprincipals.org. Take care.